night doubleheaders forever because that's where crazy happens. The Dolphins, back and forth they went. Dinged up was Tyreek Hill, but in the end, they squander a 14-point lead with 3 minutes remaining. Over the last 20 years, teams with 14-point leads with 3 minutes or less left, 3 and 2,074. This is the third such instance of such a loss, and I cannot begin to explain what happened. That is why these gentlemen are here. Bryant McFadden, Ryan Wilson here to answer on behalf of the Miami Dolphins. How does something like this happen? We're talking about a Miami team as dominant as anybody on home field and a Tennessee team that hadn't won a road game since last season. 0-7 on the road this year. How does this happen?
Just so I'm clear, 3 wins, 2,074 losses.
That is 3 wins, 2,074 losses when leading by 14 or more with 3 minutes left.
And it's exacerbated when you're talking about a Titans team that, as you pointed out, has played so poorly on the road, beset by injuries, unloaded some guys at the trade deadline, has a rookie quarterback, offensive line is in shambles, was without Jeffrey Simmons tonight, and they still found a way to go to South Florida and beat a team that's trying to get the #1 overall seed in the AFC. I have no answers. I want to hear what BMAC has to say, because before this game, Joe, BMAC told us this. Don't mess around and play with your food, because you're going to find yourself in a ball game late. And they messed around, and they found themselves in a ball game late, BMAC.
And there you see it. This is the 4th such instance. So percentages shifting here with one result. Let's call it 4 and 2,000.
Well, that changes everything.
Changes everything. 14 points with 3 minutes remaining. You're knocking on the door of the 1 seed. Now the Ravens are at home sitting and smiling. We'll have that conversation regarding the playoffs here in a moment. But first, BMAC, what did you see in those final moments of this game that made Tua and the offense so ineffective? I mean, they had the ball 3 and out, give it right back after the first touchdown. I'll ask you the same question the same way. How did this happen?
Well, it felt like the Miami Dolphins, their team on both sides of the football field, the offense and defense, the game was over for them at the 4:30-minute mark in the 4th quarter. At that time, they were up, 27-13, and they felt like, oh, the game is over. Let's jog across the football field, say our goodbyes, go in the locker room, celebrate. No, you still had over 4 minutes left to go on the clock. So it's up to Mike McDaniel and his staff to keep his guys dialed in. They were not dialed in. We saw missed opportunities. And what happened with Tennessee, they kept their foot on the gas. That's what happens when you get complacent, when you get relaxed. The game is never over until you see all zeros on the scoreboard. And for the Miami Dolphins, there's no way in the world, guys, you're supposed to lose this ball game. Up 14 points. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry for the bettors that took the 13.5 points in favor of the Miami Dolphins, because you felt extremely good about your bet with a little over 3 minutes left to go on the clock. The Tennessee Titans didn't care anything about that. They said as long as we have time on the clock, we have a fighting chance, and they fought and they surprised everyone in regards to finding a way to win this ball game. And for Miami, they're dealing with injuries on the offensive line. No one cares. The other teams you're going against, they applaud your problems. It's your job to find a way to get it done. They did not. Tennessee, got to tip your hat to them, because these are the type of ball games Tennessee would lose. They tried to lose it, but Miami tried harder to lose it. So they were successful in losing this ball game.
Yeah, fleeting was that hope for the Miami money in this one. You're chasing the whole game, never going to cover that 13.5. Then you get across that number, and in an instant, you give a touchdown back. All right, at least the Fins are going to win. And in an instant, you're now trailing into can't get the team into field goal range. This could be a turning point in a season, positive or negative. I mean, you've been put into a circumstance if you're the Miami Dolphins. We'll see how they respond. But in terms of what we saw within this game, Ryan, we got to look for the first time this year at an extended period of no Tyreek Hill, and we really saw this offense shudder beyond that. Goes to tell you how fragile hope and offensive explosion is when you lean so much on a talent like that. What did you see from the Dolphins without Tyreek?
You know what it looks like? It looks like the Kansas City Chiefs in 2023 without Tyreek, because Patrick Mahomes will tell you, quite candidly, I would imagine, in private, how bad the wide receiver situation is without the best player at the wide receiver position in the NFL, and Tyreek Hill. Tyreek came back out in the second half. Looked like he was going to be decoyed. Then he started catching passes and doing Tyreek things. And it wasn't too late. They, as B-Mac and Joe, you've talked about, they were up 14 with 3 and change to go. It was just a matter of thinking the game was over, and that was the concern. Now, if there are long-term concerns about Tyreek, whether it's his ankle or maybe his knee, whatever it happens to be, that's an issue, because you do have Jalen Waddle, but then what? You have Braxton Berrios. Cedric Wilson was starting to ask to do some things that he's not typically asked to do consistently. You have Durham Smythe, the tight end, and then you have Devon Achane running routes. So that starts to mess with the formula that's been so successful for you. And oh, by the way, the Dolphins came into this game losing 3 games. All 3 of the losses had been to teams with winning records. This flips that on its head, because now you lose your best player for a large part of the game, and then you lose to a team you have no business losing to, and you have a month left in the season to figure this thing out. And oh, by the way, you're still trying to battle for the number 1 or number 2 seed in the playoffs. This thing can go sideways in a hurry if they don't get their act together, and they have to travel to perhaps a cold weather climate in January to play, playoff football, and not being the team we saw for the first 3 quarters of the season.
And what we also witnessed tonight, guys, for me, Tyreek Hill is a more valuable MVP candidate than Tua Tagovailoa. I think it's safe to say, these guys were definitely in the conversation in regards to the MVP award. But you take Tyreek Hill away from this team, Tua is not the Tua that we witnessed throughout the better part of this season. But if you keep Tyreek Hill in this offense, heck, we saw a year ago, without Tua, he's going to do numbers, because he just provides an element of fear that no other offensive weapon has at their disposal. But also factor in, when he was in the lineup, Tennessee did a great job in making sure they keep a safety over top. They kept a safety over top of Tyreek Hill, and they ran different games with the guys in the front that confused the offensive lineman and got Tua off his first read. When Tua was getting off his first read, he got a bit rattled in the pocket. He started to kind of scramble. By that time, the pocket was collapsing, especially in the second half, and that's where Tennessee started to have success. And the last issue that I have with Miami, even with Tyreek Hill on the sideline with an ankle ailment, in the red zone, I saw 2 times specifically in the second half, inside the 5, all passes. You have the leading touchdown getter at the running back position in Raheem Mostert, and he never touched the football. That didn't make any sense. Your team has been relying on the ground and pound attack, especially inside the 10, inside the 5, and your running back never got an opportunity to touch the football. You had to settle for field goals. So there was so many different facets in this ball game where Miami dropped the ball. Ultimately, you got to tip your hat to Tennessee, like I said, because they kept the foot on the gas, and they surprised everyone with a huge upset over the weekend of play.
Yeah, kudos belong to Will Levis and this Tennessee team for doing what they did in these moments, but the conversation does surround Miami and what this means, because we are looking towards postseason football and just the weeks ahead. Jets, Cowboys, Ravens, Bills, that's what Miami's looking at right now, and we've gotten a really unprecedented access to this team throughout the season. We've seen that they're coached in a different way, Mac. It's all good when it's all good. How do you expect them to respond coming off of this sort of, it's not hyperbole to call it one of the worst losses that we've seen in decades. Up 14, 3 minutes remaining. This is unprecedented in many ways. What sort of response do you expect here as we take a look now at the 2-seed Dolphins?
Well, they find a way to get back in the winning column, Joe. If you're a playoff caliber team with championship aspirations, you don't usually see 2 bad losses back to back. That's what coaches used to tell us all the time. If you're a great team, you don't have back-to-back bad losses. But we don't know what the status will be of the Cheetah, and they're facing a very, very confident bunch in the New York Jets, especially on the defensive side. Yes, you get the Jets at home at the crib, but right now what we're seeing, that Hard Rock Stadium isn't as devastating to opposing teams as they are in September and October compared to December. So right now with the Jets, knowing that they still have an outside shot of getting in the tournament, they're going to get the New York Jets' best effort, especially on the defensive side. And one would think, if you're talking about what we witnessed tonight at home against the Tennessee Titans, heck, you can go back a few weeks ago. Remember, they struggled against the Raiders. Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders. They were right there. Jalen Ramsey game-winning interception led to that victory for the Dolphins. They've been having some hiccups at home, so I expect them to get back on track somehow to find a way to win a ball game, because if they're a great team with championship-like aspirations, they don't have two bad losses back-to-back.
It's an offensive line that has struggled in weeks past, even with all of that talent in the offense. You remove the center from it, and then you stare down the Jets' front seven, and then you stare down the Cowboys' pass rush, then you stare down the Ravens' front seven. The road ahead is not welcoming, Ryan Wilson. We said this was going to be the stretch that we were going to learn a lot about him. I think that stretch started a week early in the eyes of many here on Monday night. As you assess what's ahead, and you look at the 2 seed, and you look at a Chiefs team and other teams just a game off of them for that 2 seed, do you see a home playoff game for the Miami Dolphins?
Let's go to the NFC for a little instruction on how this might play out, because don't forget the Philadelphia Eagles are the number 2 seed coming into Sunday's action. Their stretch over the last 4 or 5 games, Cowboys, Chiefs, Bills, 49ers, Cowboys, and they've lost 2 in a row. And the concern was, what's wrong with the Eagles? Well, the concern is they are playing a gauntlet of great football teams, and this sort of feels like what's happening in the AFC with the Miami Dolphins with the schedule that you talked about. We just saw there in the graphic. And to B-Mac's point, the Dolphins are going to have to flip the script and do anti-Eagles things in their next football game to remain relevant in the number 2 seed conversation. They're going to the playoffs, but you have an opportunity now to prove that you can beat good football teams, something you have yet to do this year, and to bounce back from a horrible loss, perhaps one of the worst losses that we saw this weekend. And oh, by the way, do the things that the Eagles were not able to do, because I'm not sure that these teams are too dissimilar. They're teams with a ton of talent that haven't quite lived up to expectations or haven't faced the test yet and been able to prove that they are the team that deserves to be a number 1 or number 2 seed. So I'm going to withhold judgment until what happens next weekend, because this feels like a situation where this could get away from the Dolphins pretty quickly. And then you sort of touched on this earlier, Joe. It's no longer, Mike McDaniel is a quirky coach who gets the most out of his players. It's, okay, we got to start coaching football and winning football games, and enough with all the stuff that isn't customary to coaching up football teams as we're used to seeing it.
It is the first time a 14-point home favorite lost outright since 2020. Again, unprecedented. This loss for the Miami Dolphins, and it couldn't come at a worse time as the road ahead gets much harder. Bryant McFadden, Ryan Wilson, I'm sure opinions will change in the weeks to come as well, and there's one place to be for it all. That's Game Day Scoreboard. They finish, we start. Highlights, reaction, sounds you won't get anywhere else, and visits from the booth on those big CBS games. Join us each and every Sunday on Game Day Scoreboard.